The auction was almost over. The loud voices, the shouting. The sound of metal doors opening and closing, it all started to fade. One by one, the cages were emptied. Buyers from different planets had come, wearing strange robes, some with masks. Some with eyes that glowed. They picked their aliens, paid their credits, and walked away without a second thought. Slaves were loaded into ships like objects. No one cared about their names, their stories, or their pain. But one cage was still locked. It sat in the corner of the market, covered in dust and shadow. Inside the cage was a small alien girl. She had pale blue skin, big glowing eyes, and long thin arms. She sat on the floor, knees to her chest, and didn't speak. Her name was Lyra. But no one ever asked for her name. She's broken. One trader had said, she doesn't talk. Doesn't move, useless. Another laughed, she's not even worth feeding. And so cage after cage was opened, but hers stayed shut. Lyra had been in that cage for years. She didn't remember her planet anymore. She only remembered cold floors, strange faces, and pain. At first, she had cried. Then, she had screamed. But now, she just waited. Every day was the same. Food thrown into the cage like trash. Cold water in a rusty bowl. No words, no warmth. Today was supposed to be her last day, not because someone would take her, but because, after the auction, she would be thrown out with the garbage. That's what they did with the unsold ones. They said the weak ones had no place in this galaxy. The sun was setting on the red sky planet. Shadows grew longer, lights flickered, and traders counted their credits. One last announcement echoed across the auction block. Final call. All slaves sold. Auction closed. The workers began to shut the lights. Lyra closed her eyes, waiting for the end. She was tired. She was cold. She was ready to disappear. But then, something strange happened. Footsteps slow, steady, and heavy. A man was walking toward her cage. Not a creature, not a buyer with glowing eyes. No, 'twas a human. Humans rarely came here. They were feared. They were strong. And they didn't waste time on broken things. But this one was different. He had short dark hair, rough clothes, and a long scar on his cheek. His eyes were calm, but sharp. He looked at Lyra's cage and stopped. The trader standing nearby laughed nervously. "You don't want that one, sir. She's useless. Hasn't spoken in years." The human didn't answer. He just knelt beside the cage and looked at Lyra. She opened her eyes. For a moment, there. Eyes met. His were green, tired but kind. Hers were glowing, full of fear but still alive. Then he whispered for words that would change everything. "I'll take this one." The trader blinked. "Sir, are you sure?" "There are better," I said. "I'll take her," the human replied, firm but quiet. He pulled out a black card and placed it on the scanner. The machine beeped, and the cage door opened with a loud click. Lyra didn't move. She thought it was a trick. No one had ever opened the door without pain coming next. But the human stepped inside the cage. He knelt and gently picked her up. She was light, too light, like a feather. He wrapped her in a soft brown coat and carried her out. Everyone stared. Whispers followed them. Why her? Is he mad? She's nothing, but the human didn't listen. As they walked toward his ship, Lyra tried to speak, but her voice was too dry. She hadn't said a word in so long. The man looked down at her. "My name's Daniel," he said softly. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." Lyra didn't believe him. Not yet, but in that moment, for the first time in years, her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from something else. Hope, maybe. Inside the human ship, the lights were warm. The air smelled clean. Daniel placed her on a soft bed and gave her water. She stared at the cup, then slowly drank. He didn't chain her, didn't lock the door. He just sat across the room and watched her silently. Lyra pulled the coat around herself and closed her eyes. She still didn't understand why he had chosen her, but for the first time, she didn't feel like a cage animal. She felt noticed, and that small feeling would grow into something powerful, something that would shake the stars. Lyra woke up in a soft bed. She blinked, unsure if she was still dreaming. For years, she had only known metal floors and cold cages. But now, there was warmth under her, a soft blanket over her, and silence, not shouting. Not pain, just silence. The ship hummed gently. She could hear the engine below. A smooth sound, not loud or angry like the slave transports. Lyra sat up slowly, her thin arms shaking. She looked around the room. It was small, but clean. There was a chair, a table with some tools, and a box of clothes in the corner. Daniel stood at the doorway. He didn't speak, didn't move. He just waited. He held a tray in his hands with food, fresh food, not dry pellets or old scraps. Lyra stared at the tray. Then she looked at him. Confused, Daniel stepped forward and placed the tray on the table. "I thought you might be hungry," said softly. His voice was calm, not like the traders who always shouted. Lyra didn't answer. She didn't know how to speak anymore. Her voice felt lost, somewhere deep inside. Daniel didn't push her. He turned and left the room, closing the door halfway, not locked, not shut, just enough to give her space. Lyra looked at the food. There was a small cup of soup, a piece of bread, and something warm that smelled sweet. She picked up the spoon with shaky fingers and took a small sip. Her eyes widened. It was good. Better than anything she remembered. She finished the food slowly, not because she wasn't hungry, but because she was scared it might disappear. After eating, she sat quietly. Was this a trick? Was Daniel waiting to punish her later? But hours passed, and no one came to hurt her. The lights dimmed gently as if saying, "Rest now." So she lay back down, pulling the blanket close. She didn't sleep. She listened, watched, waited. Next morning, Daniel knocked before entering. He brought more food and a small glass of juice. Still, Lyra said nothing, but her eyes followed his every move. "You don't have to talk," Daniel said, setting the tray down. "I just want you to be safe." He placed something else on the table, a small stuffed animal. It was soft, shaped like a fox. Found it in one of the storage boxes. He said, "Thought you might want something to hold." Lyra looked at the fox, unsure what it was for. But she picked it up slowly, holding it close to her chest. Daniel smiled. Not big, just a small one. Then he left the room again. This became the routine. Every day, he brought food, clean clothes, and small things, a book with pictures, a soft pillow, a brush for her hair. He never shouted, never touched her without reason. He always knocked, always waited. After 3 days, Lyra spoke her first word. She whispered, "Lyra," pointing to herself. Her voice was dry, small, but clear. Daniel turned and looked at her, surprised. Then he nodded. "Lyra," he said, repeating her name like it was important. "I'm Daniel." They stood in silence for a moment, and then, for the first time, Lyra smiled, just a little, just once. Over the next few days, she began to speak more. Just small words. Yes. No. Thank you. Daniel never laughed at her, never rushed her. He taught her names for things, showed her how to use the buttons on the ship, and let her sit in the co-pilot seat. One night, Lyra asked, "Why did you take me?" Her voice was still weak, but curious. Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked out the window, where stars moved slowly past the ship. "I saw you sitting there, and something in my chest just hurt," he said. "I've seen war. I've seen people do terrible things, but you..." He paused. "You looked like you had nothing left." Lyra looked down. "I didn't," she whispered. Daniel turned to her. "Then we'll build something together." He said, "No more cages." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. But she wiped them away quickly. She wasn't used to kindness, but now she was starting to believe it was real. The next day, Daniel gave her a small necklace, a tiny charm shaped like a star. "It's not much," he said, "but it means you belong here, on this ship, with me." Lyra held the necklace tightly in her hand. She nodded. In her mind, a small voice said, "Safe, safe at last." But in the shadows of space, someone was watching. The auctioneers didn't forget. They didn't like loose ends, and Lyra, the last unsold slave, was about to become a dangerous problem. Lyra stood near the window of the ship. She watched the stars move slowly past, blinking softly like tiny fires in the dark. Her hands touched the smooth wall, and for the first time in many years, she wasn't behind bars. She was free to walk, to sit where she liked, to breathe without fear. But freedom was still strange. Sometimes she still flinched when Daniel walked too close. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night, shaking, hearing voices that weren't there, voices from the auction, from the cages, from the dark past that held her heart tight. Daniel noticed, but he never asked too many questions. He gave her time, space, and silence when needed. He spoke in soft tones, never raised his voice. He kept a small light on outside her room at night, so she never had to sleep in darkness again. Every morning, Daniel offered her a cup of warm tea. Sometimes she accepted, sometimes she didn't. But he always offered it, and that small act gave her comfort. One day, Daniel brought her to a room filled with screens and lights. "This is the cockpit," he said, "the brain of the ship." Lyra looked around, wide-eyed. Everything blinked and hummed like it was alive. He pointed to buttons, switches, and controls. "This is how we fly," he explained. "You want to try?" Lyra looked at him in shock. "No one, ever." "Let me touch anything," she whispered. "Well, you're not anyone's prisoner now," he said. "You're my co-pilot." She sat in the seat slowly, hands shaking. He showed her the simplest command: how to turn on the lights. She pressed the button and gasped when the room lit up. Daniel clapped softly. Lyra smiled, not out of joy, but out of wonder someone trusted her. That evening, Daniel gave her a small data pad. "It's a language tool," he said. "You can learn to read and speak better with this." Lyra took it and studied for hours each day. She loved the sound of words, the shape of letters. She began to speak longer sentences, sometimes even laughing softly when Daniel told a joke. But the fear didn't disappear. It lived deep inside her, like a cold ghost. Sometimes, if a door slammed too hard, she would hide under the table. If the ship made a loud noise, she would freeze, heart racing. One night, she had a nightmare. She saw her old cage, the darkness, the cruel eyes of the traders. She screamed in her sleep, crying for help. Daniel rushed in and found her curled up in the corner. Sobbing, he didn't speak. He just sat beside her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're here. You're safe." Lyra clutched his arm, afraid to let go. "I thought I was back there," she said, her voice shaking. Daniel nodded. "Sometimes the past tries to pull us back," he said, "but I won't let it take you." The next day, Lyra made something. A small bracelet using wires and thread she found in the ship's supply box. She gave it to Daniel, placing it in his hand without a word. He looked at it, then at her. "For me?" She nodded. Daniel wore it on his wrist, smiling. "Thank you," he said. Lyra didn't smile, but her eyes glowed a little brighter. Their bond grew stronger each day. They shared stories, not many, but enough. Daniel told her about the war he fought in, the people he lost, the things he did that still haunted him. Lyra listened quietly, then slowly began to tell him about her world. "It was green," she said one night. "Lying on the floor near the engine room, big trees, blue rivers, soft ground. She paused. Then they came, and everything burned. Daniel didn't ask who they were. He didn't have to. He had seen many planets suffer the same fate. The powerful take, the weak lose, and no one stops them. But something about Lyra made him feel like stopping them was still possible. One morning, as they floated above a quiet moon, Daniel gave her a small package. Inside was a set of clothes, not rough slave rags, but real clothes, a jacket, boots, and a small silver pin shaped like a bird. "What's this?" Lyra asked, holding the pin. "It's a symbol," he said, "for freedom, for flight. You don't belong in a cage, Lyra. You belong in the sky." She wore the jacket proudly, the pin shining on her chest, but in the far corner of the galaxy, someone else had seen the same symbol. A tracker had found Daniel's ship's signature. A message was sent: the girl is alive and with a human. They didn't care if she had changed. To them, she was still property, still a key to something lost. And now, they were coming for her. The stars outside the window looked peaceful. But inside the ship, a quiet storm was growing. Lyra sat at the dining table, turning the silver bird pin between her fingers. She didn't know why, but today, her chest felt heavy. Memories kept knocking on the door of her mind, and this time, she was too tired to keep them out. Daniel noticed her silence. He placed a warm drink beside her, then sat down without speaking. Lyra's fingers stopped moving. She looked at the drink, then looked at him. "Daniel," she said slowly, "do you want to know what happened to me?" Daniel didn't rush. He nodded. "Only if you want to share." Lyra took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly. She placed the silver pin down and began. "I was 6 when they came," she whispered. "They came from the sky in black ships, large and loud. My people were scientists. We didn't have weapons, we didn't fight." She stared at the wall. But her eyes saw something else, something far away. "I was in the garden with my mother and sister," she continued, "when the bombs fell. The ground shook. My mother grabbed me, told me to run, but I froze." Daniel sat still, listening. "Not interrupting, I saw her die," Lyra said, voice cracking. "She covered me when the fire came. She saved me." There was silence in the room. Only the soft hum of the ship filled the space between her words. "They took my sister," Lyra said, eyes wide with old fear. "She screamed my name until the sound stopped. I don't know where she is, or if she's still alive." Daniel gently placed his hand on the table near hers, not touching, just close enough to show he was there. Lyra's voice turned cold. "They put me in a cage. Sold me from one ship to another, like I was cargo. They said I was valuable, but they didn't tell me why." Daniel frowned. "Valuable?" He asked. "Why?" Lyra shook her head. "I didn't know then," she said, "but I remember something now." She stood up and walked to a storage box in the corner. Digging through old items, she pulled out a small, broken metal object. It looked like a simple piece of junk, but her hands held it carefully. "This," she said, "was given to me by my father before the invasion. It's called a mind key." Daniel leaned forward, curious. "A what?" "It stores memory," she explained. "Not just my people's memory, science, knowledge, codes. It's all in here, but it needs a pattern to unlock it." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "And you have the pattern?" Lyra nodded. Slowly, "I think it's buried in my head," she whispered. "Locked, forgotten, but still there." Daniel stood up, the weight of her words settling in his mind. "That's why they didn't sell you," he said. "You weren't useless. To them, you were too important to give away." "They were waiting for someone to buy me quietly," Lyra said. "Someone who knew what I carried." Daniel's jaw clenched. "They wanted your knowledge," he muttered, "to control it. Sell it. Use it." Lyra nodded. "And now that I'm gone." They'll come looking just then. The ship's alarm beeped. A warning flashed across the console unidentified signal nearby. Daniel ran to the cockpit. Lyra followed, eyes wide. "What is it?" she asked. "A drone," Daniel said, scanning the data. "It's watching us." He moved quickly, shutting off external lights and jamming the signal. Lyra stood frozen, the fear returning to her bones. "They found me," she whispered. "They're coming." Daniel looked at her, his face serious but calm. "Then we won't let them take you," he said. "We'll find out what's inside that key. And we'll use it to stop them." Lyra looked at the mind key. Then back at him. "You don't have to help me," she said. "This is dangerous." Daniel shook his head. "You're not a thing, Lyra," he said. "You're not a tool or a weapon. You're a person, and I don't leave people." Behind, Lyra felt something warm inside her chest. It wasn't fear, it was strength, not just his, but hers too. Something was waking inside her, something powerful. She nodded, holding the key tight in her hand. "We need to find the place where this was made," she said. "My home planet." Daniel set a course on the map. Stars shifted, and their journey began far away, in a dark room filled with screens. A voice growled. "Find the girl," it said. "Bring her back alive." But Lyra was no longer a silent girl in a cage. She was a survivor, and now she had something even stronger than secrets. She had someone who believed in her. The ship shook violently. Red lights flashed across the cockpit. Daniel gripped the controls with both hands, guiding the ship through the narrow asteroid belt. Behind them, enemy fighters followed fast, cold and silent. They were here for Lyra, and they weren't going to stop. Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat, eyes wide but focused. She wasn't the same weak girl Daniel had carried out of the cage. She was still scared, but now she knew how to move. "How to help? They're gaining on us," she said, watching the radar. "Blink with red dots." Daniel nodded, teeth clenched. "I see them. Hold on." He twisted the ship hard to the left, sliding between two spinning rocks. One of the enemy ships hit the edge of a large asteroid and exploded. But two others kept coming. They were fast, too fast. "Charging the pulse cannon," Daniel said, his voice sharp. Lyra reached for the power switch. Flipping it on, the cannon hummed, glowing bright. Daniel fired a blue wave shot from their ship, blasting one of the pursuers into dust. The last enemy ship pulled back, retreating into the stars. Daniel didn't relax. "They'll be back," he said, "and next time, with more." Lyra took a deep breath. She looked down at the small device in her hands, the mind key. "We need to find the vault," she whispered. Daniel turned to her. "What vault?" "The place my father hid the rest of the knowledge," she said. "The key only works if we reach it." Daniel set a new course. "Where is it?" Lyra closed her eyes, focusing hard. Images flickered in her mind: blue trees, silver hills, a temple with glowing doors. "Outer ring," she said. "Planet Arvox." Near the Ghost Nebula, Daniel's eyes widened. "That's deep space, nearly abandoned. Full of raiders and pirates." Lyra looked at him, calm. "They won't expect us to go there." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then that's where we'll go." They traveled in silence for a while. Lyra sat with the mind key, gently tapping on it. It beeped once, then glowed softly. Pieces of ancient code appeared on the screen. Symbols from a lost language. Lyra stared at them, remembering bedtime. Stories her father used to tell. Those symbols were not just words, they were maps, puzzles, and warnings. Suddenly, a noise came from the back of the ship. A soft beep, then a thump. Daniel jumped from his seat. "Stay here," he told Lyra. Pulling out his weapon, he moved slowly through the narrow hallway, checking every door in the cargo room. He found it a small black drone, round and silent. Sitting under a crate, it had followed them, hidden during the attack. Daniel raised his gun and fired. The drone shattered into pieces. Sparks flying back in the cockpit. Lyra watched a small red light on the screen. "Daniel," she called. "They know our location." Daniel ran back, checking the signal. He cursed under his breath. "We need to go dark," he said, flipping. Switches, all tracking systems off. Full signal silence. Lyra looked at him. "How long do we have?" Daniel stared at the map. Not long. He guided the ship toward the Ghost Nebula. Thick clouds of gas surrounded them, hiding their signal. It was dangerous. Navigation was hard. And many ships had disappeared here before, but it was there. Best chance. Inside the nebula, everything turned blue and hazy. It felt like they were flying through fog. Lyra watched closely as the ship slowly moved forward. Then she saw something, a flash of metal, a shadow, something big. "Daniel," she said quickly, pointing. He turned the ship and gasped. A massive wreckage floated a heady, old cruiser. Broken and lifeless, but something moved on its surface. Before they could turn away, a signal was sent to them. "Stop your engines. Prepare to be boarded. Pirates." Daniel tightened his grip on the controls. "No way," he muttered. He spun the ship downward, hiding under the wreckage, flying dangerously close to sharp metal. Lyra held her breath as the ship scraped the edge of the wreck. Then they dropped lower, disappearing into a gas cloud. The pirate ship followed. But slowly, Daniel whispered. "They don't know where we are yet." Lyra pointed to a small tunnel. "Inside the wreck. Go there," she said. "I think we can fit." Daniel nodded and moved the ship forward. They squeezed through the tunnel, barely fitting behind them. The pirate ship searched but didn't follow inside. They were safe for now. Daniel let out a breath. Lyra leaned back in her seat, exhausted but proud. "You were amazing," he said. She gave a small smile. "So were you." Outside, the wreck blocked them from sensors. They had a few hours to rest, maybe more. But they both knew the peace wouldn't last. Lyra held the mine key tightly. They were close now. The vault was near, and the truth inside it could change the galaxy. But only if they survived the next chase. The wrecked cruiser groaned around them as Daniel and Lyra sat inside the small ship. They were hidden deep within the old metal bones of the long-dead warship. Outside, pirate ships searched the nebula, but no signals could pass through the thick clouds inside. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the soft tap of Lyra's fingers against the mine key. Daniel worked on scanning local systems, but his eyes kept drifting toward her. She hadn't spoken much since they escaped the chase. Her face looked calm, but her fingers told another story, moving quickly. Nervously, she was trying to remember something. Something deep. "I think it's almost ready," she finally whispered. Daniel turned to her. "The key." She nodded. "I feel it. Like something inside my mind is opening." Daniel moved beside her and watched the screen of the small device. Glowing symbols floated across it, lines connecting like a map. "It's reading you," Daniel said, surprised. "It's unlocking." "Because of your memory," Lyra closed her eyes. "I can hear my father's voice," she said, her voice soft. "He said if danger comes, the vault will answer to blood and truth." "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. Lyra slowly raised her hand and placed her thumb against the scanner. The screen flashed, beeped, then showed a star map, one blinking light in the Ghost Nebula, near the edge of a forgotten moon. "That's it," Lyra said. "The vault is there." Daniel checked the coordinates. "It's close," he said. "We can reach it in 2 hours." He looked at her. "Are you ready?" Lyra stared at the screen. "I have to be," she whispered. They powered the ship slowly, avoiding detection. As they flew deeper into the nebula, strange shapes appeared in the mist. Frozen ships, old satellites, and debris from wars long forgotten. It felt like flying through a graveyard of the stars. Lyra kept the mind key close. Her mind grew heavier with each mile. She could feel pieces of herself returning, memories once lost. Now, rising like shadows, she saw her father's face. He was tall, with silver tattoos on his arms. He worked. In a white lab with glowing walls and soft music, he taught her to read symbols, to listen to the stars. He told her that knowledge must never be caged, never used to hurt, but someone else had wanted it, someone who had paid slavers to take her people. To find the vault and control its power, Lyra opened her eyes, breathing hard. It wasn't just a raid, she said suddenly. Daniel looked at her. What do you mean? She shook her head. The auction was a trap. She turned the key again. More symbols appeared, this time messages from her father, saved before he died. To whoever finds this, the vault holds the source of the Arvox core. If used with greed, it can control minds. If protected, it can heal them. Daniel leaned back, stunned. That's what they wanted, he said. Control. Lyra nodded. They wanted me because I could open it, she whispered. I was the last of my family. Suddenly, an alert blinked on the consola. New ship had entered the area. Daniel cursed under his breath. They found us again. Lyra stood up, her eyes glowing with a strange strength. Then we reach the vault, before they do, she said firmly. Daniel looked at her and nodded. He activated the engines, flying toward the blinking light on the map. The nebula grew thicker, and static filled the comms. No one could track them, here not easily. Finally, they saw it, a hidden valley on a cracked moon, with crystal towers sticking out from the ground. In the center stood a gate made of silver and stone, with markings that pulsed like a heartbeat. That's it, Lyra said, eyes wide. Daniel landed the ship quickly and followed her out. The air was thin, cold, but Lyra didn't stop. She walked to the gate and placed the mind key in the center. It sank into the stone and glowed. Symbols spread across the door like veins. Then, with a soft click, the gate opened. Inside, the vault looked like a library of light, floating orbs, spinning books of energy. And glass tubes filled the space in the center. A tall crystal pulsed with golden light. Lyra stepped forward and touched the crystal. It lit up, sending waves of warmth across the room. Suddenly, she heard her father's voice again. If you are here, Lyra, it means you survived. Use what I've left to protect, not to destroy. Tears ran down her cheeks. Daniel stood behind her in silence. He didn't need to say anything. He was just there. Outside, engines roared. The enemy had arrived. Lyra turned toward the door, her face calm but fierce. We're not running this time, she said. Daniel raised his weapon. Then we fight. But Lyra smiled. Not with guns. She said. She lifted the crystal, and the room began to respond. The vault was alive, and it had chosen her. Outside the vault, the enemy ships landed one by one. Heavy metal doors opened. Dark armored mercenaries stepped out. They carried stun rifles, signal blockers, and energy chains. Their leader, tall man with cold red eyes, scanned the valley. With sharp precision, he raised one hand and spoke into his comm. She's inside. Get ready to move. Inside the vault, Lyra stood calmly, her hand on the glowing crystal. Light surrounded her like a shield. Pulsing with quiet power, Daniel stood nearby, watching the door with his weapon ready. He had seen battles before, but this time, something was different. This wasn't just a fight to survive. This was a fight for the truth, for Lyra's right to choose her own path. They're here, Daniel said, his voice steady. Lyra nodded slowly. I can feel them, she whispered, but the vault is listening to me now. She placed the mind key into the heart of the crystal. The floor beneath them began to glow. With symbols, a deep sound echoed from the walls, as if the vault had awakened after sleeping for centuries. Are you sure about this? Daniel asked. Lyra looked at him with clear, glowing eyes. Yes, she said. It's time. The vault's light spread to the outer walls, reaching the gate just as the mercenaries approached. The lead soldier raised his weapon. Open the door, or we blast it down, he shouted. But the vault responded with energy. A shield formed around the gate, and a Lear's voice echoed from the stone. You caged my people. You hunted my mind. Now face the truth you tried to bury. The soldiers stepped back, confused. What is this? One asked. Before they could attack, the ground shook and pillars rose from the valley floor. They weren't weapons. They were beacons, sending signals across the stars. What's happening? Daniel asked, looking at the screens on his wrist. Lyra smiled faintly. I activated the memory pulse. She said, the vault is broadcasting everything what they did to my people. What they plan to do with the knowledge? Daniel looked amazed. You're showing the whole galaxy. Lyra nodded. No more silence. No more hidden pain. Suddenly, the shield at the gate flickered. The enemy found a way to weaken it. A blast hit the vault wall, shaking the floor. Daniel stepped in front of Lyra, ready to fight, but Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. I'll protect us, she said. She walked to the center of the vault and raised both hands. The crystal rose into the air, shining brighter than ever before. Her voice filled the space, not shouting, just calm and live. And, full of strength, you tried to own me, she said, but I am not yours. You tried to erase my family, my world, my name, but I remember now. And I choose to be more than a survivor. I choose to be free. The vault responded. Energy burst from the crystal, spreading like a wave. It passed through the walls, the floors, the sky. And when it reached the enemy soldiers, stopped them. Their weapons froze, their suits locked. Some dropped their guns and backed away in fear. One of them fell to his knees, whispering, "What is this?" The leader of the mercenaries shouted, "Fall back! Fall back!" But it was too late. The vault had judged them, not to kill but to end their control. Daniel ran to Lyra as the crystal lowered. The vault lights dimmed gently, returning to their soft glow. You did it, he said. Lyra nodded, but her eyes were distant. I saw everything, she whispered. My father's final thoughts, my sister's last location, even the pain of others locked in cages like mine. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to carry it alone, he said. She looked at him, her voice soft. I know. Later that night, under the stars, Lyra stood at the edge of the valley. The pirate ships were gone. The mercenaries had left defeated, not by war, but by truth. Daniel stood beside her. So, what now? He asked. Lyra looked at the stars. There are others like me, she said. Others who carry pain, secrets, memories they were forced to forget. I want to help them. Daniel smiled. Then let's do it together. She turned to him. Holding the silver bird pin in her hand, I was afraid to hope, she said. But now I know hope can be real. She reached out and placed the pin on his jacket. You didn't take me to own me, she said. You took me to give me a chance. Daniel nodded. You gave me something too, he said. A reason to fight. A reason to believe again. They stood there in silence as a soft wind moved through the valley. Two souls, once lost, now found. Not as master and slave, not as soldier and mission, but as something stronger, as family.